Hello everyone, I'm François Bouchet and today I'm going to talk to you about a research study I've been doing with my colleague Rémi Bachelet on a novel topic, the one of recurring students. So first of all, what are recurring students? Well, nowadays when as an instructor you start a MOOC, it's very common that the majority of your students are already familiar with MOOCs, they have already attended to one in the past. But as MOOCs develop and tend to have session after session, there can be a new phenomenon, which is the fact that students who have already attended to a previous session of the MOOC are going to return for a new session. And this is what we call recurring students. So recurring students are students who come back for a session of the MOOC they have already attended to before. So from there are three questions that we can ask about those still hypothetical recurring students. The first one is relative to the proportion of enrollee. The second question is relative to the behavior of those recurring students. Assuming that they exist, and it's not a big spoiler to say that they do they differ in terms of how they behave in the MOOC, or do they behave the same way as a new student? The third question is relative to the performance of the students in the MOOC. So are they students who had completed the MOOC in the past or failed to complete the MOOC? And are they going to complete more that second time that they are attending to it? So the question relative to the performance, we are going to address that as well. In order to study that phenomenon of recurring students, we worked on data coming from a MOOC on project management organized twice a year by my colleague Rémi Bachelet. So this MOOC has been ongoing since 2013. That means we have data coming from 4 sessions so far. But we considered only 3 sessions in this study because for technical reasons the platform changed from the first session to the second session, so it was easier to use only data coming from 3 sessions. So in each session of the MOOC, the core content remains the same. However, there have been some additional content added every time. What's important also to mention is that there are 2 tracks available in that, well, 2 main tracks available in that MOOC, a basic one and an advanced one, which require additional homework and more content to review for the students in order to get the certificate associated to the advanced track. Overall, we have more than 14,000 students on average per session, so that's a good number in order to be able to perform some statistics. So the first question, how to identify the recurring students? Well, we have two sources of information. The one is coming from an optional research questionnaire that we ask the students to fill at the beginning of the MOOC session. And the second one is the ID the students have on the platform, because normally when they come back, unless they change their email, they are going to have the same ID as the first time. So using data from GdP3, we saw that there were, using the ID, 8% of recurring students. When we used the questionnaire data, 6% of the students said they were coming back from GdP2, but 13% said they were coming back from either GdP1 or GdP2, knowing that only roughly 40% of the students answered to that questionnaire, but that's still giving a good partial view. So when we compare the students for whom we had information from the ID and from the questionnaire, we saw there were a few discrepancies. Students who said they were not there before and we found that they were, or the other way around. But overall it was reliable. So overall the ID was a good way to identify the recurring students. Now, if we do the same study from data from GdP4, we find that the proportion of recurring students is higher, and interestingly, there were 90%, so the vast majority who are coming back from GdP3, but also 20% who are coming back from GdP2. So here we see that the numbers are overlapping, which is not a mistake. It's because there are some students who had attended before to GdP2 and GdP3, and they were coming back for GdP4. So we might have serial recurring students who attend every session of the MOOC. We will need more data to see that, but it seems that it can happen. So the second question is relative to the behavior difference of those recurring students. So from now on, we are going to split the recurring students between successful recurring students and unsuccessful recurring students. 2/3 of the recurring students had failed the first session of the MOOC they attended to, and 1/3 were successful. So when we see how those students are behaving relatively to the initial optional questionnaire, we see that the recurring students tend to answer as much or less than the new students, which can be explained because they have already filled that questionnaire, so maybe they feel that they are less interested in filling it. And the unsuccessful students were also filling it more than the successful students. Again, that could make sense if we think that they want to come back in order to this time complete it. So they are more motivated to do the full thing than the previously successful students. In terms of time spent answering, we see that overall the new students and the recurring students were spending the same time, but sometimes the recurring unsuccessful students were spending less time than the new students. So they had been through that questionnaire already, they know the question, so they go faster through it. The third question is related to the performance differences. So here we consider the number of points obtained overall and whether or not the students completed the MOOC. So when we consider data coming from the basic track, we see that the recurring students perform less well, they get less points than the new students, and the previously successful students get also less points than the previously unsuccessful students. That can seem weird, but when we analyze data coming from the advanced track, we see again that recurring students are getting overall less points than new students, but that successful students get more points than unsuccessful students. So what does it mean here? It means that the students who had previously completed the MOOC obviously come back for the advanced track, so they don't spend time on the basic track, they just focus on the advanced track. However, you cannot validate the advanced track without validating the basic track. So they just focus on the content, they don't care about the certificate, they just want to see what's new. When we see data from the people who completed the session, that's confirming what we had seen with the number of points, that recurring students complete less overall, and that the unsuccessful students are the ones who tend to complete more than the successful students, which is again because they try to do the basic track and possibly the advanced track, whereas the successful students are just going to focus on the advanced track. What are the conclusions? Well, first, recurring students exist and they are here to stay because we see that the proportion tend to increase. The recurring students tend to answer to the optional questionnaire less and faster than the new students. And overall, they complete less the session, but for different reasons. In the case of previously successful students, it's because they want to go faster through the basic content, so they answer less to the questionnaire and they go directly to the core of what interests them. They don't want to complete everything again. And for the previously unsuccessful students, they are motivated since they are coming back, but they are struggling since they validate less than the new students overall. So what are the consequences of this analysis for a MOOC designer? Well, first, we need to take into account recurring students when we design new sessions for an existing MOOC, because clearly there are students who are going to return, we can't ignore them. Second point, we need to possibly try to retrieve previous answers from the questionnaire to just offer them to update information. Instead of asking them to fill everything, we just show them their previous answer and say, is it still okay? If yes, just go through it. Now, for the previously successful students, one way would be to let them focus only on the new content. So maybe since if they already validated the basic track, tell them, okay, you have completed that part, so we take that into account. Now you can just focus on the advanced part if you want. And for the previously unsuccessful students, since we know they are going to struggle more, we can offer them some additional support from the beginning, because we don't need to wait like for new students to see that they are going to fail. We know that they are going to struggle more, so we can be there for them from the get-go. Thank you for your attention. I'm looking forward to hearing your questions.